The trade deadline is still over a month away, but we got a blockbuster, one of the biggest trades in NHL history that we are going to fully break down, along with your trades that you sent in, and we're going to react to those as well. We've also got answers to questions like who's going to replace Alex Pietrangelo on Team Canada for the Four Nations face-off, and what do the Winnipeg Jets need to do at the deadline to get over the hump? Those and all kinds of other questions are going to be answered on this week's edition of the BarDown Podcast, presented by Crown Royal. Gentlemen, I did a little video in reaction to the Mikko Rantanen trade instantly just to get something up, and I told everyone that we would obviously be talking about it on the podcast that came out Tuesday, which people were excited that we were going to be talking about it, excited to get kind of initial thoughts, which was great. I've said all that I have to say about it. I don't think I feel any differently 2 days later. I'm still very confused because there are a lot of now reports that have come out that have said that Mikko Rantanen was willing to take less. Nathan MacKinnon said he doesn't care about money and it didn't matter to him to be the highest paid player on the team. So there's still a lot that we don't know that we might ever not know, but from both of your perspectives, this trade, break it down however you guys want.
I like the hat, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Shout out Toronto Marlies.
Absolute stunner of a trade. And also, Luca, I will say I did enjoy your take and your thoughts on it. I thought it was I don't know. I feel like if that was my team, I would just been so emotional about it, and I wouldn't have been able to.
I was the night before. I took 12 hours to collect my thoughts.
I feel like you separated and you had a lot of perspective on the deal. Man, I'm trying to think of the last time we've had something come really out of nowhere like this. In not just the NHL, in any league, truly to see.
There have been a few in the NHL. I don't know if it's necessarily to this magnitude, but there have definitely been a few. Seth Jones for Ryan Johansson was a massive trade.
Yeah. But again, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
That's what I'm trying to say.
PK Subban for Shea Weber was quite the stunner as well. But yeah, there's definitely a bit more of a shock value.
I think all things considering, and yes, I've been a little bit discouraged reading some of those reports that you talked about, Luca, with. And just the general consensus is it doesn't feel like Colorado really pushed very, hard with Rantanen about getting something done. But if they were really concerned about losing him for nothing, and if they don't believe in the philosophical idea of building a top-heavy roster with a ton of cap devoted to your, top three players, then I think they did very well on this deal. And I think the return that they got was strong. I think Martin Necas is an incredible player, and I think getting him at the cap hit that he's at right now is a steal, and you're going to have him for 2 years. Losing Mikko Rantanen
this year and next year.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
When you lose the best player in a trade, it is very, very hard to confidently look at your team and say, one, we've made our team better. Two, in the long term, we're going to win this trade. But I think if they were really concerned about negotiations going south and him walking out of that door for nothing, and maybe that is too conservative an approach, especially when you feel like you were kind of in a cup window with Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar in their prime. But I still think that they got a solid return in this deal.
I agree with the return part 100%. I don't think it's a question of if they're a team that doesn't want to build top heavy. And that's why, to me, I actually don't really think that this whole trade is as complicated as it seems. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it's just Joe Sakic and the Colorado Avalanche do not want to build top-heavy teams. They didn't win the Stanley Cup with a top-heavy team. This is a team that is mindful of their cap situation. They won their Stanley Cup without paying a single player over $10 million. Obviously, it's cliche, and I know that the cap's going up, but one team in NHL history has won with a guy on their team getting paid $10 million or more, right? Or was
Eichel made 10 and Bob made 10.
And Bob made 10. Okay, so the past two, but the cap's going to be going up.
More than 10, 0 players.
Yeah, 0 players. And I just think that Colorado's probably looking at where they are now when they're already paying Nate more money, right? And they're already not as strong as the team as they used to be, and you have to pay Nate. It's just even what is he making? 12.6? It's not even that's very fair, more than fair value for MacKinnon. But I just think that Sakic probably looked at the situation and said, we don't want to build our entire team top heavy because we're not going to be as good if that's the case. They're going to have to pay Makar. Like Luca, I know we talked about it at hockey the other day. Like Makar could end up making, given his next deal, could end up making $15 million on his next deal. And like, if you're paying all three of these guys all of your money, yes, they're dogs. There's not going to be a lot of wealth to spread throughout the rest of the lineup. I think Sakic saw it and said, we're not building our team like this. We can get a guy like Natchez, who by the end of his contract might ask for, if he keeps playing it the way that he's playing, what would on a long deal, like $10 million fair for a guy like Natchez, which would be potentially $4 million less than Rantanen. You spread that wealth around a little. I just think that that's the thought process. And I actually think the Avalanche did very well. Good for Carolina. We've been talking about how this team needs, that all-star goal scorer for a long time. They finally got it. And he obviously has previous chemistry with Aho, right? They played the World Juniors together.
I think that the Avs got lucky in their cup window with McKinnon obviously being cheap and Rantanen being cheap and Makar being cheap and Landeskog being cheap throughout that all. No team is ever going to get that those caliber of players under contract at that one time without some luck within the numbers. So this was really the first tough decision I think they've had to make cap-wise throughout all of this is who should stay, who should go. Landeskog and Nichushkin's contracts, obviously, I think fans have kind of talked about those a little bit and have been well, yeah, no wonder you couldn't sign Mikko. You've locked up $13 million between those two players. You obviously didn't think that both players would be basically unavailable for the last 2 years and tied up between injuries and obviously off-ice issues with Nichushkin. So that has stung a little bit.
There's LTIR, though, too.
There is LTIR, which they've been able to use with Landeskog for sure. But I think that, fans have looked at that a little bit and are just well, you paid those guys, you paid them instead of Mikko if, you had to kind of look at it, which I don't think is fair, honestly. But people are going to take that how they will.
But, man, but to build on that, when those guys are both playing,
they're really good players.
That's good value.
Exactly,
for both those
for
guys.
sure.
Nichushkin, what is he getting paid? $6 million?
Exactly.
He's a point per game guy when he's on.
He's outstanding. And if Landeskog can come back at some point, that's obviously a big lift and is going to make this trade feel a little better for sure. It obviously probably feels like the Avs are a little shorthanded at the moment because those guys are out of the lineup. I think where I've landed on this is Chris MacFarland and Sakic. Now that Sakic is kind of taking the overseeing duties and McFarland's the everyday GM, they built a cup contender, a perennial cup contender in such a cool way where trading Matt Duchene and Ryan O'Reilly when no one thought they should have and the return they got back for those guys. I have the utmost confidence and faith in those guys until they prove me wrong, I think is where I'm headed with this. Even this season, they got Mackenzie Blackwood and didn't really have to give up a lot, locked him up. He looks like the goalie of the future. I know goalies can be weird, but they have always found value in, I think, places that are untraditional. And so this might be that. Maybe they were worried about how Mikko's game ages, although he would be still playing with Nate for the rest of time, and those two are really great together. But I'm really interested to see how Rantanen fits in with another team and not playing with McKinnon. And it's not to say that Rantanen's not an incredible player, but I just wonder what his production is going to be like without that top 3 player in the NHL. And I know he's really good on his own, but it'll be interesting to see. I know, let's take it to Marner very quickly before we get into some of these other trade reactions, but I know you did want to touch on that.
Yeah. For me, one of the first things that I thought of when this trade happened, and if you're a Leafs fan, I don't know how your mind doesn't immediately go to a Mitch Marner situation with the Leafs. Surprise, surprise, I'm talking about the Leafs. Obviously, big difference is Marner has a no movement clause, which is a huge factor in this. But I mean, if you're a Leafs fan and you're looking, let's just look at the situation, okay? Rantanen clearly wanted a certain amount of money, and even if he was willing to take a discount, Joe Sakic, who won a Stanley Cup, built a great team, probably one of the better minds in hockey, he still didn't want to pay Rantanen that, okay? Because he knows that there is so much risk in going too top heavy in your roster. All right, Mitch Marner right now, the way he's playing is probably going to be, given that Rantanen maybe even taking a cut, I think that Marner's probably playing the way he is this season. He's probably working his way into asking for more than what Rantanen could have made with the Avalanche. Like, it wouldn't be out of the question for Marner to ask for like $14 million on his next deal. Like, he's been that good in the regular season. Okay, so if you're a Leafs fan, like, how do you feel about this? Because you got to think that there have been some talks like behind the scenes kind of between Marner and the Leafs, right? Like, I'd imagine. But like, could you imagine if there hasn't really been any talks? The Leafs, I think the Leafs have to be strict and say, Mitch, this is what we're prepared to give you next year, regardless of what happens. We need to know if you're going to be willing to sign with the team for this. And if Marner says no, and he's going to be looking for more money, which I don't think will be the case, I do think Marner will probably end up signing in Toronto for like $13.5 million. But I mean, at what point do you have to just be like, Mitch, are we doing this or are we not? Because if for whatever reason they don't keep Marner and Marner gets like 14.5 from some team that's willing to spend it, like the Chicago Blackhawks.
No, there it is. Was waiting for it.
You know, it's like, could you imagine if the Leafs just lose him for nothing? And that's why I really respect what the Avalanche did here. They knew that they weren't going to pay Rantanen. They still got amazing value for him. And even though it seems so insane, because I know that the Leafs are first in the Atlantic, everything's working great. They could win the cup, but like, I don't know. It's like, even though he has the new no movement clause, it's like at some point you have to be like, are we doing this or are we not? Because if Mitch Marner leaves without getting any, and like in his right to not leave because he has the no movement, but if he leaves with the Leafs getting nothing in return, he will go down as one of the most hated athletes in the history of the organization. Like, I feel confident saying that.
I think
like, it would be awful. And like, imagine what will happen. I don't think it'll happen, but like, if Marner leaves and the Leafs don't get anything, could you imagine the outrage? I would be outraged if I was a Leafs fan. Like, I don't know.
I think where it's a little different,
The no movement clause
for sure. I also think Marner's the number on his next contract, and also the whole negotiations. There is a lot more weight on what happens in the playoffs. I do think that if they just run it back and, you know, you lose in the first round again, if I'm the Leafs, how much of a willingness is there to even just go back with the exact same core?
Dude, I agree. But like, that's what I'm saying, is that if they lose in the first round, for argument's sakes, and they're offering Mitch 12.5 a year, okay, because they're just like, we don't want to give you 14, we want to save the extra money in the future, and Mitch is just like, no, and then you have a team like Chicago, okay, who's going to have a boatload of money to work with, desperately need to get Bedard, someone to play with him. I'm just saying, Chicago, for argument's sakes, man, you're telling me that if they're throwing like $14.5 million, like that's a lot of extra money over an 8-year deal. Like,
but at that point, the Leafs now have X amount of cap space available that they can just invest in other areas of their team. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I just feel like there's a big difference where, because they're sitting first place in the Atlantic right now, like, let's not forget, Colorado's a great team, but they're also a wild card team right now. So it's a little bit different in the fact that I think to just go out and say, let's get ahead of the 8 ball and trade who's been our best player this year before we even get to the playoffs and see what we can make of this group, I think that's GM malpractice. Whereas Colorado, I understand it a little bit more because and Luca knows the team far better than I do. Just feels like the stars aren't necessarily aligned for them this year.
It doesn't. And I think with the Leafs too, and Darren Dreger actually talked about this morning on First Up 1050, and he said what's making this such a big talking point isn't anything actually from the Leafs. It's all just because it's Rantanen that got traded. It was like, if it was Pettersson, no one would be talking about the Marner comparisons with Rantanen, that if Pettersson got traded to Carolina instead of Rantanen did. It's just because both are pending UFAs and whatever, and like, you can make the comparisons there, but he's kind of saying like the comparisons kind of stop there. He's like, Marner wants to spend the rest of his career as a Leaf. I think also JT's contract coming off the books and maybe what that financial flexibility allows the Leafs to do. Although, yes, having a career here, he's not slowing down, which is crazy part of all of this. But like, having that money coming off the books and not having to look too far down the road like the Avs are, having a Makar extension kind of looming past that could make it kind of a bit of a different situation. But I think both points are fair of what you guys are saying, as far as like, it is a bunch of buzz just from us, because I think like, hey, we think about the trades and the possibility of it, because I think hockey fans all love seeing that stuff. But at the same But at the same time, maybe it really isn't as complicated as we think, and they're just waiting for the end of the season to agree on a number. They don't want to negotiate right now, and that's kind of it. No one really knows.
Like the cap is going up, which obviously, like, you know, that's going to affect the number that Mitch gets, of course. And, like, it's going to be more common to see, like, players going a little more top-heavy, like the Leafs might. But, like, I just think there's something to be said if you're, like, Trey Living, and then you look at the way that, like, a lot of these other teams have built their organizations. Like, you look at a team like Colorado who refused to give Marner or who refused to give Rantanen all this money because they know that it's not necessarily the way to build a winning team, because that's not the way they won in the past. There's something to be said. Like, maybe, I don't know. It's like, seems so insane to trade Marner because he's having such a great year. But at what point do you have to be like, are we doing this or are we not doing this? You know? This is my opinion. Like, if they lose Marner for nothing, like, it will be disastrous. Although I think he will sign, but we just haven't heard anything. We kind of heard about these whispers about Rantanen and all this stuff. Like, we haven't really heard anything on the Marner extension front in, like, a long time.
Maybe that's an intentional thing where it's like they really don't want to talk about it during the season. I know players kind of say that they don't want to kind of deal with contract negotiations during the season. And
he's having a great year.
And he's having a great year, which, I mean, it kind of coincides.
Yeah.
It's a situation that I think a lot of hockey fans will be keeping an eye on. Maybe not until the trade deadline, but we are going to talk about trades because I tweeted out, asked for some fan suggestions. Send me your wildest trades. And we've got 5 to review with you guys. And how I kind of want to frame it is which team says no in these trades, in these wild trades. A lot of them involve a lot of the same players, and especially given all the rumors. So a lot of JT Millers, a lot of Elias Petterssons, a lot of Erik Karlssons, a lot of the same teams being involved in it. Let's start with one from Winnipeg, though, because I think this one's kind of interesting. This one's from @Haley03646634. A lot of numbers in that username.
Got their sin in their Twitter handle. Maybe you should take that out.
To Winnipeg.
Shouldn't share that with people.
To Winnipeg, Elias Pettersson. To Vancouver, Nikolai Ehlers, a first-round pick, and Colby Barlow. Who says no in this trade?
Whoa.
Would you like to take this versus the Jets fan, or do you want to hear my take on it?
I'm curious to hear what you have to say.
I think Winnipeg says no. Nikolai Ehlers is a hell of a player. And Elias Pettersson, I know he's got far more term, and Ehlers is in that similar situation, and a lot of people are speculating that he could go for free.
Yep, he's UFA after this season.
Pettersson has kind of built this reputation, whether it's fair or not, whether I agree with it or not, it just feels like it's one of those where he necessarily maybe doesn't always show up when it matters the most. And the fact that you're giving...
Not that Nick does either.
Yeah, but you're also, trading in Colby Barlow. You're giving a first-round pick. Like, that's a good prospect. It just seems like a little too rich when the trade-off between Petey and Ehlers, who's having a really good year, doesn't seem to be all that much.
I think, I agree with you. I don't think I would do the trade either, but I think it's not necessarily for the same reasons. I mean, Petey, you're right, is a lot to... Petey isn't necessarily the greatest playoff performer, as we've seen, and Ehlers is having a great year. I think, I'm not saying that Nick Ehlers couldn't get traded, but I think if the Jets were, you would kind of be getting a center type player, which would be nice, but I don't know if that's necessarily the trade. And another reason why I think it's not necessarily the trade is because the Jets, and I know the cap's going up, but the Jets traditionally do not give out these massive contracts. Look at Scheifele, who's been way better than Petey this year. Mark Scheifele's been one of the best players in the NHL this year, low key. I don't think he's gotten enough credit. I think he has 27 goals now this year. He has been phenomenal. And you know how much he's making?
$8 million.
$8.5 million. And that's our highest paid player right there, him and Hellebuck. Yeah. So I just don't think it's, and that's what I'm talking about, spreading the wealth here. And not that the Jets have been this unbelievable playoff team in the past all the time, but they've consistently been a solid team. They're spreading the wealth, and that's just not really how the Jets do things. So I don't think that would happen, but it's definitely an interesting proposal.
It's an interesting one. I tend to agree with you guys both on I don't think Winnipeg would necessarily do this. And keep in mind, all these trades are wild because a lot of these players involve no move clauses and things like that. So we're throwing all that out the window right now. In a perfect world, would this trade happen? I can understand wanting to have Pettersson sign for that much money for as much term as he's making, because I'm sure in a few years, like if he finds his form in the playoffs at 11.6, like it's going to be a steal. Yeah. But for Vancouver, you're obviously taking a risk in getting Ehlers back and hoping that he gets signed. So that's probably, if you're Vancouver, why I would, like, if we're going who says no, I don't know if a first-round pick, which is probably going to be in the mid-20s, and Barlow is enough to give up Pettersson with that much term. That could look like a bargain.
Especially considering you could lose Ehlers for nothing.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think you'd have to, like, sign Ehlers right away.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think like that'd be part of the deal.
For sure.
And what does Ehlers make?
Makes $6 million right now, but that's going up.
Like like on his next deal, like what is
could be closer to
$9 million,
8 to 10. Yeah. Probably that range.
I think $9 million is going to be fair for Nick if the cap's going up like it is.
Let's move on to our second trade here. This one comes from at Leafs since 97, obviously a Leafs fan, and he said, in this instance, we're taking out no move clauses, which makes sense. This one's one we've kind of talked about, I feel like, in past shows, but interesting to talk about now. Mitch Marner, a second, and Topi Niemela to the LA Kings for Quinton Byfield and Brant Clark. I think if you're the LA Kings...
That's a good.
It makes you
deal.
think.
Wow.
I think if you're the LA Kings, you're probably saying no because Brant Clark looks like the second coming of Drew Doughty a little bit, with
the second coming of Lane Hudson. That's what
second coming. He looks unbelievable for as young of a player as he is, and the role he's taken on without Doughty in the fold. He looks incredible, and I am not ready to give up on Quinton Byfield in any way either. Where
I just don't think it doesn't align with the timeline of the Kings in my eyes, and I understand if you look at the Kings roster.
They need a guy like Mitch Marner.
It's fair to that's the point of criticism. Be like, you don't have an alpha offensive player that can just score 100 points and be the best player on the ice every single night, and that's what Marner can do. But they are also very well balanced. Quinton Byfield's like 22 years old. Brant Clark's 20 years old. These are guys that you can potentially have for the next 10 plus years being top line players. And the Kings, I don't think they're necessarily in a rush where it's like, get Marner now. We need to start winning playoff series. Like if you get Marner on this Kings team and you meet the Oilers in the first round, I'm still picking the Oilers to win that series.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially with, as much as it's crazy to say for such a young guy, like the loss of Brant Clark to this roster right now is a pretty pivotal hole you have to fill. And then you also look at Byfield, like he signed that contract extension until 2029, $6.25 million. That is great value that I don't think, especially given where the Kings are right now and him only being 22, like maybe in a few years, if he's still not working out to the potential that you wanted to see from him, having him at 6.25 is a nice trade asset down the road and not quite now for a guy like Mitch Marner that you'd have to sign, instantly make your highest paid player on your team. Yeah. Even if it would help you offensively, it just seems like a lot to give up for him.
Mitch Marner will be a Chicago Blackhawk in 6 months.
Oh, boy.
Couldn't you see it?
We'll see. We'll see about it. 3 more trades to give you here. Let's go to one that involves the Pittsburgh Penguins and everyone's favorite rumor, Sidney Crosby being traded to the Colorado Avalanche.
I can tell you who says no right now.
The Pittsburgh Penguins.
Sidney Crosby says no.
Really?
You can pry.
Okay, let me give the trade first. It's at Will_I27. This one, or actually no, that's another Pittsburgh trade that I can go over. This one is from at Ryan_M_Stark. Pittsburgh receives Gabriel Landeskog, Callum Ritchie, and a second, and Colorado gets Sidney Crosby. Captain swap with the Avs' best prospect going back to the Penguins. At the moment, we don't even know when Gabriel Landeskog is going to play an NHL game again, if he's going to play an NHL game again. But he's obviously signed and locked up for a long term at $7 million per year. If I'm the Avs, this just feels like a 1-year thing where, like, again, you have to then convince Crosby to re-sign. How many more years are you going to get out of him? You just traded Mikko Rantanen, and now you're trading your captain. If I'm the Avs, I'm saying no.
Oh, man, I think if I'm the Avs, I'm saying yes.
Yeah.
If I'm Pittsburgh, I'm saying
no. Yeah. What are you supposed to do with Gabriel Landeskog if you're Pittsburgh? You got to trade him
Yeah.
after.
A lot of money.
You don't have to trade him.
What he's going to play with Cal Ritchie and Rutger McGroarty 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's like that would
That's
happen,
fair.
and you're just like, man, I feel bad for Gabriel Landeskog.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's more just like I think there's potentially better value on the table for like, man, it's Sidney freaking Crosby.
I don't disagree with that.
Still an elite player, just ignites a fan base instantly, especially on a contending team. Man, Crosby's still a dog. Like this guy could be like still going at a very elite level by the time he's 42. You know,
I agree with that. Maybe I'm just now tied too much emotion into my players because I'm just like,
hey, respect.
We just traded Mikko. Like I haven't seen Landeskog play since he lifted the cup.
Yeah,
and
that was
we're just gonna
crazy.
trade him for Sidney Crosby like that.
Sounds like a pretty nice
There
deal.
needs to be
actually.
some loyalty, I feel like, in my franchise. Let's go with another Colorado one that maybe makes more sense. JT Miller to Colorado in exchange for Casey Middlestat, a second and a sixth. This comes from Avs fan A7X.
I think I could tell an Avs fan crafted that one because he does not want to give a lot back.
Yeah, I was
JT
gonna
Miller.
say that,
That's not
like,
enough.
especially with JT Miller under contract for a little bit here, coming off an 100-point season, like probably will thrive with a change of scenery. If I'm Vancouver, I'm saying no. I think, what would you need if you're Vancouver for this deal to happen? I guess is what I'm saying.
More than Middlestat.
Yeah.
For sure, more than Middlestat. You're talking like Middlestat, a first and a prospect, and this happens? Or do you not even entertain it if Middlestat is the key piece coming back?
To me, it's not so much about like what value is equivalent in terms of going both ways. A lot of it has to do with like what does Vancouver want to do right now, and where's their roster at? And I don't know if adding Casey Middlestat to this core necessarily
Makes them better. It doesn't.
Yeah, and I feel like Vancouver should be in a cup window right now.
Yes.
They should be.
I agree.
So I don't know if that would really interest me that much. Maybe it's one of those where it's just hard to find something that works. The value I don't think is far off if you're giving Cal Ritchie, Middlestat, first, maybe I would probably have to throw in another.
Probably
pick.
stop there,
That's a
but
lot.
yeah.
Yeah, Cal Ritchie, Middlestat, and a first is a lot.
JT
That's
Miller's a
I was
very,
gonna say
very good
Middlestat
player.
is kind of, he's had a very tough year where he's been infuriating at times and very good at times, and you see like the really, really high level playmaking that comes with him, but you also see very clear deficiencies in his game, and I don't think he'll ever be more than like a 80-point player is like pushing the high end of his ceiling at 26. Like obviously you get him a lot younger, but JT Miller is like an established kind of point per player guy. If you're looking at Vancouver's cup window and you're like, okay, we're going to keep Pettersson, whatever rift there is, we're going to trade JT Miller, but like we need something back that keeps us or in this cup window alive. Like I don't think it's Casey Middlestat, but I don't know. I maybe it is. If it is, that would be great for the Avs. I'll take JT Miller all day, every day for that price, given what I've seen this year.
I feel like, Vancouver's probably going to lose whatever deal they are involved with JT Miller.
Yeah.
But I feel as though the Middlestat second and six that's just not nearly enough value. Like you need to be getting, you probably want Richie back in that deal too.
Yeah, you probably do.
Yeah.
You probably want something for the future as well. Two more here. I'm going to give one bonus one just going through these. One more for the Leafs. Elias Pettersson to Toronto. Vancouver, Morgan Riley, Max Domi, Fraser Minton, a second in 2025, a third in 2025, and a sixth in 2026. This one comes from at CWG Somerville.
That's a
No first round pick involved,
when
and
you're
I
playing
think
NHL,
I think
and-
you got to stop there.
You just keep like adding things that are like not
Yeah,
worth a lot.
it's like
and it adds like this
decline.
much in the trade value.
Yeah.
You just press request again, and hopefully the computer puts it through.
Yeah, that's what this feels like.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know.
Leafs fans seem to be pretty darn upset with Morgan Riley this year. Like every Leafs fan I talk to, they are just not impressed by Morgan Riley, and I don't think I would do this in a million years if I was the Canucks. Like, there's just like too many pieces. Like
Too many pick. Like
Yeah.
this guy offered every pick you could to keep the first round pick for Toronto. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to put a first in there if you want Pettersson at that term and that contract. Also, I love Fraser Minton. Think he's going to be a great player. Like, I really do enjoy him. Morgan Riley can't be the centerpiece that you're getting back for Elias Pettersson, especially if you're not giving up a first-round pick. Like, it's a non-starter.
Do you guys think that the Leafs might dangle Easton Cowan in a trade at the deadline if they need to?
See, I was just going to ask. If you, let's say now you're going Morgan Riley, because I think the Canucks could actually use some help on the back end. Like, I don't think that's out of the question. But then your centerpiece is kind of Cowan and a first and a second, let's say. You throw whoever else you have to make the money work. If that's Max Domi, that's Max Domi. But is that enough?
I'm just trying to think back. Like, they didn't really ever dangle Nyes. And I think Cowan might be seen as an even bigger, better prospect that they're excited about. I think there's also this weird, like, London Knights pipeline where Mitch Marner's had such a good career in Toronto. And they've had 2 years of Cowan where they've been able to kind of look at him, control his development, and really like what they've seen from him.
Have they always really liked what they've seen from him? When the lights were shining brightest, man, dude, that's 2 World Juniors that he wasn't good in.
I don't think we should put that much stock into a 2-week tournament when the guy's scoring in every single OHL game he plays in.
Okay, man, and like guys have scored like Rob Schremp scored 147 points for the London Knights, and
but now you're like nitpicking like odd examples of like Connor Brown had 1 million points in a year. Yes, that happens sometimes, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be Easton Cowan. It could.
No, and what I'm saying is I like Easton Cowan, but I don't think that Easton Cowan scoring all these points is gonna like for sure translate into him being like a great NHL player.
So what does it take in your mind for them to move Easton Cowan? What makes it worth it? Who do they have to get back?
If Pettersson is on the table, that's an interesting thing to consider.
I think it would have to be like someone very, very, very good. Like
Elias Pettersson.
Yeah.
But the problem is that I don't think the Leafs are going to be able to afford another $11.5 million guy. I mean, I guess you lose, what does Riley make? Like 8 a year, right? Like 8. So now you're going to tell me that they're going to trade PD 11.5, and then they're going to have to sign Marner. Like
Riley and Domi works with the cap. I just don't think Vancouver would be interested in that at all. But yeah,
I don't disagree.
No.
Last one I'll give you guys because we got a couple Stars fans that apparently really want Erik Karlsson from the Penguins. One, Karlsson to Dallas. Pittsburgh gets a 2026 first, 2025 third, but it's a conditional one. It's a first if Dallas wins the cup. And then Niels Lundqvist. And then the other one from Benjamin Wu 77. That one was from Go Stars 777. This one, Pittsburgh gets Matt Dumba, 2025 first from Dallas. And then San Jose gets 50% retaining Erik Karlsson, and they get a 2025 third out of that. So it's a little 3-team deal. San Jose becomes the broker there, getting, I guess, what Chicago got, which also we didn't talk about that when we broke down.
Where was the first rounder, man?
The Blackhawks have just found a way to fumble like every. How in the world did they only get their original 3rd round pick back from brokering arguably the biggest trade in the last decade?
Yeah. Not the best.
That's wild to me. But anyways,
like Louis Domingue says, not the best.
Not the best. Any of those Erik Karlsson deals to you enough?
I like the first and the third that becomes a first if they win the cup. I would try to negotiate that. It's like if you make the conference finals, maybe this bumps up a little bit more than a third.
Mm-hmm.
But that seems fair. I don't think Erik Karlsson carries this massive.
Are we even gonna give if there's no salary retention here, how many years does Karlsson have left on his deal? Now, this guy's making way too much. Like, he's making way too much money. Like, I would be reluctant to giving up. Like, I mean, call me crazy. I mean, Erik Karlsson's obviously still a productive player. He's not nearly as fast as he used to be. He's making a ton of money.
So he's got $10 million, 2 more years before he comes a UFA.
If you look at Dallas,
2 seasons after this year.
Yeah.
Oh,
does
man.
Dallas even?
I don't know.
They've got $1.9 million in space right now. Like, they obviously can't do it unless Tyler Seguin goes on LTIR. His 9.85 would obviously help, and you lose 1.25 from Lundqvist. So they'd have to get creative with the cap space. I think Lundqvist is an interesting one, just given he's an RFA next year, is only 24 years old. That defensive core that the Stars have is loaded, and so I don't think he'll probably ever have a fair shot at realizing his potential in Dallas right now. So I can understand why he might be the centerpiece of this deal. But if I'm Pittsburgh and you want me to retain some salary too, like I probably also need like a Maverick Bork or something like that.
Yeah,
that would
better
make it a
prospect.
little more interesting for me.
I think you would want to have some, because to me, Dallas at that price, he just feels like a luxury. It's something like you already have so many good defensemen. Yeah, you want that like superstar puck mover that can dominate and take over on a power play. But like Heiskanen is already very, very good. And I know his offensive game isn't at the level of Carlson's, but also like you made a great point about 2 years from now, you're still gonna have this guy in the books at $10 million.
And he really is just a power play specialist.
And you don't want
at
that to
point.
anchor your team down from maybe there's an opportunity for another superstar that they can go out and add to down the road, but it's like, oh, we're, our hands are tied because we paying Carlson all this money.
100%.
I don't think Carlson is nearly what he used to be. He's getting paid $10 million for 2 more seasons after this. Oh, like not worth that amount of money right now, I don't think. And like,
That's true. I will say, and this kind of goes to the future though. They have a lot of contracts coming off the books with like Ben loses, you lose $9.5 million from him next year, 35 years old. Matt Duchene, Dadonov off the books next year. Sam Steele off the books next year. So like they've got room if they wanted to. I just don't know how much of an upgrade that like they're not winning the cup. I don't think because of a move like that.
No, and like if you're gonna allocate that money somewhere, I think like they're gonna have money to spend. Don't spend it on a guy like Erik Karlsson who's making $10 million the next 2 years. Unless Pittsburgh's retaining like $4 million off of that deal the next 2 years, which they can afford to do, and then that's when you start talking about, okay, we can get a first involved.
Yeah.
Because if anything, like you're actually at the same time, you're almost doing Pittsburgh a favor by taking Erik Karlsson's contract if there's not a lot of salary retention. Like, this is a Pittsburgh team. I mean, I guess they can afford to take on whatever contracts, but like, I don't know. They're in such a weird space right now, the Penguins. It's just they kind of make my head spin a little, if I'm being honest.
I think what we've learned doing this exercise is that blockbuster trades are very difficult to predict, and there are so many different factors when you're the GM of that team, let's say, because you're not just giving up like nothing here, right? Like these are massive players, massive ramifications for the future. And so it's not easy to pull off, which makes the Colorado-Carolina one even more surprising and rare, because I think if someone suggested that as a tweet 2 weeks ago, I would have said, are you crazy? Like,
Yeah.
no shot. No, like, why would you trade Mikko Rantanen
Maybe all
for
these
that?
trades will happen.
So maybe all these trades will happen, or maybe they won't. We'll have to find out. We've got the trade deadline coming in about a month and a little bit's time. Time to move on to a quick edition of Don't Think, Just Tweet. I'm going to pose this to both of you because this is kind of big news, and according to our insiders at TSN, Canada's going to take their time with deciding this. But the Don't Think, Just Tweet is, now that Alex Pietrangelo is not on Canada's roster for the Four Nations face-off, Canada will select who to replace him.
I think the fact that they're saying they're going to take their time with this is code for we're going to wait and see if Drew Doughty is available. And I think that will be their number one choice. When they announced the roster, he was kind of penciled in as, oh, by the way, if someone gets hurt and can't play, Drew Doughty is the guy that we want to be on Canada. He's got experience playing for his country. He's gold medal winner.
He's earned like he's almost like in
earned
legendary status where like he's just
Yeah.
earned it. It's like almost like not to the same degree, obviously, but like almost in that like Crosby situation where it's like he's such a legend. Get him on the
It
team.
sucks, though, that he hasn't played at all this year and he hasn't featured, and you're now kind of throwing a guy into the fire where, I mean, I imagine he's not going to have the biggest role on this team, but you're bringing a guy who, hasn't played into the biggest tournament of the year with the best competition and the best players. It's tough, but I think it will be him. There are some other good options, though, to pick from.
Like Mackenzie Weegar, maybe.
Yeah.
Mackenzie Weegar, Evan Bouchard is available, Dougie Hamilton as well. I think Darren Dreger tweeted out something like it gives Doughty about 3 to 5 games for them to kind of see what his, I guess, I'm assuming like conditioning's like, how game ready he is, what type of player he returns as from this injury. It It's not. I don't think anyone can predict that at this age. So
Yeah.
smart by Team Canada to kind of slow play this, not make a decision. I think I agree with you guys though. I think if Drew Doughty can do it, doesn't hurt having a guy like that has so much experience and also is just like he seems just like a great guy to have in that locker room as well as far as a veteran leader goes.
He's won it all. Like as soon as coming to the NHL, Olympics, Stanley Cups, horse.
That's my only don't think just tweet. I wanted to keep it quick. Quick goal of the week and quick that deserves a crown because I picked the goals of the week this week. And they both happened happened to happen a day before we're recording this, but I think they're both really good goals. One of them, Kyle Connor's highlight reel goal.
Oh yeah.
It was I think Jesse's going to probably pick this one for like that was disgusting. Who's our winner right now? I don't even know who is on our winner.
Is it
winner our leaderboard? No, it's not Bouchard.
It's Andrew Mangiapane.
No, we said MVP.
Oh, that's right. I guess,
MVP. Yeah.
What a goal, kid.
Disgusting. And then I also wanted to put Cale McCarr's in there just for the entire or no, it was Lekkonen's actually, but that's not the goal.
McCarr had a nice goal against the Jets.
He did have a nice goal against the Jets. This is it, though. He got a phantom holding the stick penalty in the dying minutes of the Rangers game, comes out of the box, breaks up the play, kind of loses it here, and then still sauces it to Lekkonen for the game winner. Probably not as nice as Connor's, but the situation was just very fitting for it.
Watching Cale McCarr skate up the ice, it's like he punishes the ice when he skates. It just looks...
It's like the Isaiah Pacheco of hockey.
He is exactly that. Him and McKinnon, they skate like Isaiah Pacheco runs. It is scary to watch. And
his like brain to hands quickness is just psychotic, man. He just thinks the game so quickly.
The final goal of the week I have for you guys has to be from Quinnipiac. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Kalen LaMarche, just an absolutely disgusting goal.
Wow.
It's this or Kyle Connor for me.
Kalen LaMarche kind of sounds like Kendrick Lamar.
Kind of swag. And the celly was absolutely nasty, too.
Yeah.
That's the nicest goal of the three.
Yeah.
All
right.
Like if that happened, that's just a gross goal.
We've got a new winner then. We've got a new leader on the board. MPP bumped off for Kalen LaMarche. That's going to be a tough goal to beat.
Yeah.
That was disgusting.
Yeah.
Celly disgusting. Goal disgusting. Unbelievable.
Like if that happens and at a pro level and not just like necessarily like
NCAA.
Yeah. level, like you're seeing that goal absolutely everywhere.
And you have seen this one everywhere too.
Yeah,
Number
true.
3 on SportsCenter in the States is top 10, which
wow,
amazing to see. So we'd love to see that. Last thing before we go, that deserves a crown. I'm giving it to Jack Roslovic, who I don't know if you guys saw the video of like when Mikko Rantanen first joined the team, or like he's meeting everybody, and Roslovic, like you can hear it in the Hurricanes video when he's like high-fiving everyone. He's like, "You got my watch?" And it's because he gave up his number 96 to give to Mikko Rantanen. And it's a great teammate move, but he's asking, hey, am I going to get my watch? And then he scored that game in his new number.
Is he wearing 69 now?
No, I think he's wearing 98.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah,
Move
he's wearing
over,
98,
Betsy.
and now Jack Roslovic.
Wow.
That deserves a crown to me because you're being a great teammate to a guy you don't even know you've just played against. You owe him something if you're Mikko Rantanen.
And you're pinching him.
Got a great laugh from Rantanen too when he heard it. What would it take for you guys to give up a jersey number for a new incoming teammate? That's the last question I will leave you with.
I think if they're better than me, then it's like it's your job. I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't try to weasel it. Maybe a dinner. That's it. Simple.
That's it.
Yeah, it wouldn't take a lot.
Probably a Rolex. My number's my identity. Like Rantanen's about to make like $14 million a year. Like
the least you could do is toss me a Rolex.
Give me a Rolex. I'm playing on league minimum. All right. You're about to make $14 million. Just give me a Rolex.
I think when you break it down like that, I think I'd want a little more than a Rolex.
Yeah, maybe a car.
At the end of the day, I have no real idea of how much money $14 million actually is. So I'm like, yeah, it's just a dinner. I'm thinking about like on the BarDown team. Someone's like, oh, I want your number. I'm like, yeah, you're just taking me out for dinner.
Yeah, take me to the BK Lounge.
I think I'd still want a Rolex if it was.
I'm so far removed from the NHL lifestyle that I feel like I can't even answer this question properly.
That's fair. Well, it's never going to happen to us in Beer League because we are not trading for players, and we only have one of each jersey number. So if you join the BarDown team, you automatically just get a new jersey number. That's going to do it for this edition of the BarDown Podcast presented by Crown Royal. We've got a whole bunch of trades to hopefully break down that are a little more exciting than the ones we broke down when they actually happened in real life. But those were really fun. Thank you to everyone who submitted those trades. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe, because 70% of you that are watching haven't subscribed. That's a big number, the ratio from 70-30. Let's at least get that to like 50-50.